If you are in the market for easy laughs, you learn that two well-tried ways are either to trip up a cliché or take things absolutely literally. Terry Pratchett. Shortly after the cancellation of Adam Reed's bizarre comedy Frisky Dingo, Reed went on a vacation to Spain where his love of adventure comedies combined with the sights and sounds to form the basis of what would become the show Archer. Though to say that there was any singular inspiration for the series would be a bit misleading, as the show borrows from so many disparate genre conventions and settings so as to best facilitate whatever joke or plotline the writing staff, many of whom were carried over from the previous show, saw best fit. The result is an amalgamation of spy tropes ranging from World War II thrillers to Cold War conventions, all the way to the ironic post-trope era where these sorts of things stopped being relevant, what with there not being a Soviet Union to serve as a simple boogeyman for patriotic American heroes to fight. At least not while taking a moral high ground. Many comic book and action flick fans were starting to question the morality of a genre where the good guys were more threatening than the bad guys, as we stopped seeing three-letter agencies as protagonists in favor of plucky, young, rebellious types fighting against these empires. So Archer takes a genre that was fast becoming a historical artifact and gives it one last kick in the rear as it was on its way out, borrowing as much from the more recent satirical takes on spy thrillers like Austin Powers as it did from the prototypes of the genre, dating as far back as the late 19th century in Sherlock Holmes or Monsieur Lecoq. The result is a TV show that wears these inspirations on its sleeves, as well as a knowledge of the context in which it was created, constantly referencing pop culture in such rapid succession that it eventually runs out of obscure tidbits to poke fun at and circles around to being a parody of itself. And man, does it parody itself. The show's humor is, in part, derived from references to lines that occurred earlier in the episode, earlier in the same scene, to earlier in the season, earlier in the show, and even in its predecessor, Frisky Dingo. In this way, it builds up its own hype, to become endlessly quotable, the snappy dialogue whipping back and forth from crass and crude to witty and intelligent, so as to blur those lines completely. This retrospective will be split up into individual episode retrospectives, themselves split into a recap and review section. The recap will cover the plot of the episode in plain terms, while review puts the plot in the larger context of the show itself, the character arcs, inspirations, and cultural impact, so basically anything I couldn't find another place for. Also, Archer as a show deals with a lot of adult themes, including violence, drug abuse, sexual content, firearms, and various flavors of bigotry ranging from modern prejudices to the hopelessly outdated. While I do sanitize my language for a better listening experience, I also have no intention of straying away from these topics so as to better cover the show. As such, listener discretion is advised. Mole Hunt. After showing up late to work due to a dog-related emergency, Archer triumphs around the office before being called in to speak with the head of ISIS, the International Secret Intelligence Service, Mallory, who is also his mother. Archer is chided for his extravagant expense account and told to clear up all of his debts with Cyril Figgis, the head of accounting, who is in a relationship with Lana Kane, Archer's ex and co-agent. But his attempts to bribe Carol Tunt, Mallory's secretary, and convince Pam Poovey, the head of HR, that there's a mole he has to investigate wind up as failures, so he simply breaks into the office after hours instead. But unbeknownst to Archer, a disgruntled employee named Kraminski has heard through Pam's proclivity to spread rumors that ISIS has a mole, and, being the mole, also breaks in to steal as much money as he can before fleeing the country. He encounters Archer hacking into the computers and forces him to transfer money from his own account to fund the escape, before taking the agent hostage. But Lana got an alert that ISIS had been broken into and rushes in to save the day, almost letting the mole escape when she gets into an argument over Archer's man-child tendencies that winds up with a standoff, where Mallory is taken hostage. But when Archer becomes aroused at the thought of his mother dying, Kraminski is taken off guard enough that Archer can shoot him, his outstanding balance being blamed on the now-dead infiltrator, as Mallory wonders why she never knew about the mole in the first place due to her relationship with the head of the KGB. The only real way to do a mole hunt episode in this way is to make it the first one of the show. Otherwise you run the risk of either A, introducing a new character the audience is obviously going to expect, or B, removing a persistent character from the show. By placing a mole hunt first, the audience doesn't know who to suspect unless they paid very close attention to the opening credits and simply matched the voice cast or silhouettes. But it also allows Archer to go through the organization one by one, to give brief introductions to the whole cast, not as he eliminates them from the suspect list, but instead tries to bribe and or threaten them into compliance. In doing so, each person then explains why they have no interest in assisting him, not so much because they're diligent employees who strongly value loyalty to their job or country or whatever, but because they have some reason to just not like the guy. Archer is the protagonist of the show, in case the title screen didn't clue you in, but he's far from the good guy. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who can unequivocally be considered the good guy of the show. Yet far from the gritty moral grayness that usually associates itself with that sentence, where anti-heroes go on crime sprees and there's a sense of pervading nihilism, Archer instead paints the super spies and shadowy boards of spy thrillers as people. We're all morally gray, but not in a cool way. Instead, a very mundane civilian kind of pettiness that defines humanity, much more than some grand philosophical idea of human nature. Training Day. After Archer drunkenly incapacitates a threat during a party, Mallory becomes concerned over the fact that Lana is suddenly into him again. So she makes a plan to turn Cyril into a Black Ops field agent so Lana will like him more, and Archer himself is the one training him. But Archer's on to his mother's scheme and is not happy about the training, less so because Lana herself is suspicious of something that's up because she is not need to know on the mission. Archer's training of Cyril is brief as he really doesn't want to do it, but he does call Trinette, one of his usual call girls, over to assist alongside Woodhouse. But during an exercise, Trinette shoves Cyril for using her as a human shield and her hand pricks a poison pen, causing her to fall to the floor. Now panicking that he killed a hooker and went behind Lana's back in the process, Cyril and Archer rush to dispose of the body, though Cyril starts to suspect that this was Archer's plan all along. Though before he can ponder this longer, a mystery car opens fire on them, revealed as Lana, who's been tracking her new boyfriend since early in their relationship. He ends up telling her the truth, and Trinette wakes up in Archer's trunk. Back at ISIS, Carol, who legally changed her name, and Pam work with an incapacitated Mallory to fix up their health plans to something more beneficial, while Mallory reveals the real reason she doesn't want Archer dating Lana. Lana is a Black Ops field agent, like Mallory used to be. A lot of Archer's personality can be explained through his relationship with his mother, Mallory, or rather, through his lack of one. She never seems to take a large interest in anything that he does until it concerns her. Then she flips from unconcerned to overbearing as she micromanages his decisions in life to best fit what it is that she wants. Naturally, Archer is not going to be so concerned with the opinions and feelings of a person who's unconcerned with his, and so he pushes back against whatever it is Mallory tells him to do. Or rather, he is concerned because you have to show some concern to so overtly disregard him. It's not that Archer doesn't care about Mallory and vice versa, is that he wants it to look like he doesn't care. So Archer lives his life dangerously, getting drunk and blabbing about being a secret agent because he wants to get caught and put into a worse position to fight his way out of. He's reckless as a way of living his life opposite to the way he's forced to. If Mallory wants him to behave, then he'll blow something up. This ends up tying into why Mallory is so concerned, though. Her beliefs about Lana are justified by her fear of the life she has behind her. Being a former Black Ops agent, Mallory is aware that this life of danger is not all it's cracked up to be, even though it's all she knows. And so, in trying to push her son away from that loose lifestyle, she ends up pulling him in even more. Diversity hire. Due to Archer blowing the covers of various ethnic infiltrators, ISIS needs to hire a less monochromatic agent to continue to receive certain tax incentives, and Mallory has found Conway Stern, a black Jew who fits the bill perfectly. Archer immediately becomes concerned over the potential affair between his mother and Conway, and Lana has the more legitimate concern that Conway may not have passed a background check, and she gets suspended for her investigation and lack of faith in Mallory. These concerns persist when Conway announces that the inventor of a stealth submarine is planning on selling the schematics to the Cubans, and he plans on using Archer as a substitute for the man's Cuban contact so he can take the plans first. Archer ends up getting these plans only to be surrounded by a hit squad, but Conway saves his life, absolving himself of any concerns about his loyalty. That is, until Conway reveals that he really was a double agent all along, and he's actually going to sell the plans to the Chinese. But Lana, having followed Archer on his mission, steps in at the last moment to retrieve the plans by grappling them out of Conway's hand, removing it in the process, and she gets rewarded for her efforts by having the suspension removed. Back at the office, Cyril and Pam fight over a corner office that Mallory ends up taking for herself, while Cristal, another name change, tries to seduce Conway. As much as I mentioned Mallory being possessive of Archer's life choices in the previous episode, Archer is just as possessive of his mother's life choices too. He tries to micromanage her life from the outside, directly confronting Conway not for sleeping with his mom, but for the possibility that he might have. He lacks the same subtlety that Mallory uses in her control over other people, but this does keep his methodology consistent with his methods of spycraft. Shoot first, answer questions later. Funnily enough, when Archer finally learns that Conway didn't have any sort of intimate relationship with Mallory, he's immediately okay with the guy. And this is after being stabbed in the back, literally, showing that his judgment of character has less to do with political affiliations and more so with how their actions affect him personally. Lana, too, is possessive over the things that she values most. In this case, not her relationship to a specific person, but her own power fantasy as the head of everything. When Conway shows up and immediately starts to take over her jobs, she's threatened as the position of number one spy starts to slip away from her grasp. This is in part why she resents Archer so much. He's the number one spy, but only through nepotism, getting the best jobs because his mother runs the place. But by dating him, she gets to exert some control over him, pulling this power away from Mallory and getting a one-up on her after all. Killing Utne. The intelligence chairman of the UN, Torvald Utne, is invited to a dinner party by Mallory, who's hoping to use the party to create an artificial attack on his life that ISIS agents can stop, so she can use the event as leverage to get a lucrative UN contract. She hires the duo of Manny and Uta to fake the assassination attempt, unaware that the head of the KGB has also hired the duo to assassinate the guy for real. The party starts, and Utne is disgusted by the lack of professionalism from ISIS, until Archer's date, Elka, who he assumes is a call girl, arrives and begins to flatter him. But Elka is actually a second assassin, also hired by the KGB to be thorough, so Manny and Uta change their plans to kill both potential targets by poisoning all the food. When their plan goes off, Elka is the first and only to die, prompting Utne to declare that ISIS will not get the contract after all, only for the assassins to shoot him before escaping. After piecing together what happened, incorrectly as Mallory assumes that Elka died of an overdose because she raided her mislabeled medicine cabinet, ISIS makes the best of the situation by dragging the bodies to another business rival's apartment to set them on fire and make her look bad. There have been hints of it before, but this episode introduces interagency conflicts over things like funding and prestige, where the enemy is not some vague fighting force out to destroy democracy, but an internal threat of someone doing the same thing as you, but better. When large government bodies run out of things to fight, they invent new enemies and turn on each other. This is true whether it's the Roman Empire reaching its maximum border size and collapsing into a century of civil wars, or multiple three-letter agencies fighting over a contract with bribery and subterfuge. This is all to say that when all you have is a hammer and you run out of nails, you start to see nails in places where there are none, and if no one else sees these nails, you put some there. We even see Nikolai hiring multiple agents to do the same job, with these agents immediately turning against the people on their own side, as they too are competing for the contract money, with an implication that the quasi-Cold War setting of Archer is meant to reflect an ideological war between capitalist countries and communism. The writers go out of their way to show the flaws in each ideology being rooted in the same causes. People are selfish, and no government system is going to prevent that. Rather than being anti-anything or pro-anything rhetoric, Archer is instead a show about humans. Honeypot. A tape of Mallory falls into the hands of a Cuban rogue agent named Ramon, and upon identifying him as homosexual, something forbidden in Castro's dictatorship, Mallory makes a plan to blackmail the guy by having Archer perform a honeypot operation. But Archer's attempts at wooing the man wind up terribly misinformed to the point of being homophobic. So he's taken in by two Miami gays named Charles and Rudy, who help him in acting more natural. But these attempts are rebuked as well, until eventually Archer tries to confront Ramon over a game of Jai-Alai. He's knocked out by a serve and wakes up to Ramon revealing he recognized Archer and knew what Mallory was trying to do all along, eventually bonding over their hatred of their own mothers. But Charles and Rudy return, revealing themselves as a Cuban hit squad, and opening fire on the two where the disc is destroyed by Ramon out of his newfound respect for Archer, before they destroy the attack and Mallory's Miami home with the Claymore. Back at the office, Cyril and Lana play Screw, Marry, Kill with the ISIS roster, while Mallory rejects Nikolai's offers to move in with him in case Archer's mission fails. Archer tries and fails to seduce Ramon as he has the wrong idea about what it is that another man will find attractive, one rooted in a series of stereotypes. His failure reinforces that these associations still exist, so Charles and Rudy do their best to try to show and not tell Archer that his approach is wrong. Instead of seducing a man like a stereotype, seduce a man like a human being. This also doesn't work because Archer's not a great human being, so he's instead forced to fall back on wagers before finally succeeding in his mission by connecting with the guy on a personal level. They bond over the pressure their parents put on them to succeed, not by their own terms, but by the terms they've misunderstood to be ideal. Archer doesn't seduce Ramon the way his mother was telling him to, he eschewed the honeypot altogether by simply being a good guy for once. Ramon ends up going on the run at the end of the episode, something that would have happened inevitably as more and more hit squads would have followed him to the end of his life. Gay, defector, it doesn't matter. So he opts not to take down Mallory with him, as Mallory is still a mother to a guy like Archer, who would be hit in the crossfire, so to speak. Partially sympathy for Archer, partially sympathy for his own mother, and partially sympathy for men like Charles and Rudy who fight for an ideology that wants them dead because they have bills to pay. There's too much of a human cost to ideological wars, as a person should cost more than an idea. Skorpio. Lana is given the assignment to assassinate an arms dealer named Skorpio on his mega yacht, much to Archer's annoyance, as now he's stuck doing data entry while comforting the very clingy Cyril, which he mostly does by listing all the things that could have gone wrong on Lana's mission. But while Mallory is at a conference, which is a rented boat with Nikolai, her micromanaging sees Lana being carried away while screaming, so she calls Archer to save the day, much to Cyril's terror, who stays behind trying to call the agents before eventually having his phone destroyed by Krieger, and then sleeping with Carol or whoever. Back at the yacht, Archer finds Lana aboard the ship, completely safe and sound, as she explains she was meandering on her mission to take a vacation away from her boyfriend. Archer joins her after donning a disguise, but the two end up in a threesome with Skorpio anyway, who reveals that he knew their identities all along. A shootout happens where Archer and Lana reveal they're still on each other's life insurance, before Archer shoots at the munitions and blows the whole yacht to pieces, with Mallory possibly confessing that Archer is Nikolai's son before he and Lana resurface. The two plots of this episode see Mallory and Nikolai spending time together on a rented boat, while Lana intends to hang out on Skorpio's yacht to blow off steam. The mission statements of each respective organization take a backseat to having some fun, and the fact that, were these organizations to wipe each other out, they would have nothing left to do. The KGB and ISIS are allegedly locked in a secret war, but if ISIS were to finish the job at any point, Mallory would not only be out a lover, but a rifle, and then her whole organization would have nothing left to do. And just as the organizations have to feud to justify their existence, the people within the organizations also have to feud to justify theirs. Lana loves Cyril almost as much as she hates Archer. In fact, exactly as much as she hates Archer due to their relationship being almost entirely predicated on the fact that Cyril is nothing like the other guy. And yet, because Lana is only dating him as an anti-Archer, it means that all the things she expects out of him are construed as opposites, and you can't much pay attention to something's opposite without also understanding the thing itself, much as ISIS cannot continue to operate against the KGB without also understanding the KGB. Skytanic. Archer and Lana are told to board the rigid airship Excelsior due to a bomb threat that was called in that the Captain Lammers is concerned with. Also concerned is Cyril, as he always is when Archer and Lana spend time together. So he boards the Excelsior in disguise, as do Cheryl and Pam because they're in the episode too. But Cyril keeps walking in on Archer and Lana in various states of undress, including a planned walk-in by Archer after he finds a lead on the bomber. That is to say, he lost his, quote, wife in a game of Baccarat against one of the investors. Eventually, after trying to chase down a panicked Cyril, Lana enters Mallory's cabin and learns the truth. There was no bomb threat. Mallory called in a fake one so Lammers would give her a cabin for free, and so Trudy Beekman would lose hers. Though there is a bit of irony in the sense that Lammers himself has also planted a bomb because he's concerned about the fact that his whole 401k was in company stock, which is tanking. So he shorted it and plans on bailing via parachute to make his money back. Lana and Archer infighting allows him to get away after Archer shoots the first mate who knew how to disarm it, so they have to call Ray to navigate their defusal. After a few miscommunications make things even worse, they settle for pushing the bomb off of the rigid airship, with Cyril bursting in to assist Lana as Archer was shot in the foot again, and they celebrate repairing their relationship despite bombing whales. The first episode of the first season is about a fake mole hunt that turned out to be accurate. The second was training an agent, ending in a car chase between ISIS. Then submarine plans being sold, merely a cover-up for a betrayal, then trying to scare a contractor, get back a sex tape, justify a vacation, make a fake bomb threat, steal a diamond to expose a security flaw, leave ISIS, and then fake an orgy. Very little of what ISIS actually does is directly related to saving the world, or fighting threats to an ideology, or whatever slogans organizations use to justify themselves. It's all about image and faking that they actually have a real job. And these lies extend within their relationships as well. Cyril and Lana make up at the end of the episode despite the fact that the original confrontation Cyril was hoping to have did not occur. There's an implicit lie to their future now, one spurred on by hypocrisy as Cyril keeps accusing Lana of doing what he himself is just about to apologize for, all while misunderstanding the situation to come out even worse. In general, if a partner suddenly gets very defensive about infidelity, that means they're usually themselves cheating. They accuse others of doing what's on their mind. The Rock. Archer and Lana break into a museum to probe their security in order to secure a consultant job, only for this job to go to Odin, a rival agency, instead. So she proposes that Archer and Lana steal the diamond for real to prove Odin's not up for the task. Back at HQ, Cyril has a diamond ring that he's preparing to use to propose to Lana, though the ring is tiny due to costing 2 months of his tiny salary. Enticed by this, Cyril leads the rest of the ISIS office workers in a general strike against management for a cost of living adjustment. They're able to trap Mallory inside of an elevator and shut the power down during negotiations, though she holds out for a while. This breaks when Archer and Lana attempt to infiltrate the museum only for Archer to be blinded by his night vision goggles as Lana calls for an extraction, one that doesn't come because of the strike. So using his diamond to create a satellite computer that can send a helicopter, Cyril and the rest are able to make a makeshift signal that finally sends an extraction team, with the cost of living adjustment for the drones coming out of the agent's bonuses. The idea of focusing on the office comedy aspects of secret agent work is central to the show Archer, and in the process, many of the cast who would normally be background characters are elevated to the status of recurring. But they don't really get exciting jobs to do that would get action movies made about them, so their lives are brushed away and work dismissed as unimportant. Like any bad boss, Mallory spends considerable effort trying to ensure the people who she's underpaying not only don't look important, but don't feel important either. If she can make them think they're useless, they'll accept being paid useless person wages. But what gives this whole strike a sense of irony later is that most of these side characters were not, in fact, useful, not so much to the missions ISIS took part in, but to the series as a whole. As the show goes on, people like Cheryl and Pam and even Cyril start to get upgrades to their immediate usefulness in the show to justify their continued inclusion in plot lines, as they can only sneak aboard a ship so many times, and they do sneak aboard so many times in the future. But the rest of the cast is indeed consistent of background characters who ultimately fall by the wayside as the main cast expands, but only slightly. Job offer. Archer and Lana catch a suspect in Paris only for agents from Odin to take him into custody while the two are distracted. As they're recovering, Agent Barry, who Archer crippled years ago, arrives with a business card, asking Lana if she wants to join up. But Archer thought that the offer was extended to him, and when he asks Mallory about moving agencies, she kicks him out by expressing doubt that he'll actually go. Archer arrives at Odin, where Barry realizes his mistake, but his boss, Lynn Trexler, wants Archer on board to make Mallory jealous. This works until a drunken morning Mallory puts out a burn notice, making Archer too risky to keep on board any longer. So Lynn Trexler orders Barry to kill Archer just as Lana arrives, seeking her own job with a jealous Cyril in tow. She hears about the ordeal and even offers to kill Archer herself, but ends up turning on Barry instead, and forging a document to make the burn notice look like a false flag. She breaks out with the guy and stumbles upon Cyril as he's in the middle of relations with the former head of HR, then leaves with Archer, explaining how she threw away her dream life to be with him, though she's still not exactly happy with that. Back at ISIS, Mallory learns of the burn notice and sobers out long enough to act as though it was her plan all along. Lana has the opportunity to make a play for a better pay, a better office, nicer co-workers, and a significantly higher level of respect by joining up with Odin, but she turns it all down when she discovers that she'll have to kill Archer to get any of it. She was fine at first, back when it was simply a matter of leaving everyone else behind, but once she really has to consider the cost of moving up in the world, she starts to second-guess whether it's worth it. Of course, the more pragmatic answer for why she's stuck in this sort of mentality is the fact that TV in general likes to stick with the status quo. So of course, Lana will stay at ISIS as long as the rest of the cast is there too. Archer as a show has much more serialization than most other TV shows of its ilk usually display, but in this instance, that's a step too far for anything outside of a season premiere or finale. This is why the psychological warfare between Archer and Mallory over whether he'll leave or not is immediately picked up on by the audience. We know they're not going anywhere, and in the back of the heads of the characters, they know that too. As soon as Archer actually meets with Lynn Trexler in person, he immediately starts to tell old stories about his mother's abandonment, and even Lana brings Cyril along, who proceeds to spread the ISIS proclivity for getting around with him. Even when they leave ISIS, the cast still can't just leave ISIS. Dial M for Mother. The episode begins with Archer breaking into his mother's home with a hatchet before cutting to the past, where a new anti-fraternization policy has been implemented in ISIS going into effect over the weekend. This policy is in reaction to Cyril's serial cheating, as well as, to a lesser extent, Archer's, which also prompts Lana to get back at Cyril one last time by calling the men of the office to engage in intercourse with her on Cyril's desk, though her actual plan is to simply have them pay her to claim they did the deed for bragging rights. Meanwhile, Archer is roaming the streets in a daze after having an argument with Mallory over the fact that she doesn't know who his father is, and the story that he knew growing up was a lie. He's then kidnapped by Manny and Utne, who perform some elective brain surgery to plant a Soviet mind control chip in his brain to turn him into a double agent. But this chip barely works and reacts poorly to a cell phone signal, causing Archer to instead fly into a murderous rampage to go after his mom. Mallory makes him a grilled cheese and then shoots him when he goes mad again, and as she stops the bleeding, they have a discussion that, regardless of who Archer's father really is, they for sure know his mother. Archer and Mallory's relationship can, in the best possible terms, be explained as incredibly toxic. Neither person treats another one well, nor can they really be assumed to treat one another well based on what they deserve. That is to say, they treat each other the way they've been treated in the past. It's hard to picture either person improving for long enough to reverse this trend, but there's still some small comfort to be taken in the fact that, at the end of it all, they really do still care enough about one another. Not enough to improve themselves, but at least to not outright go no contact, or worse. Even the worst people in the world are still people, and it's not as if a person can ever truly be heartless just as much as a person can ever truly be perfect. So relationships in this way are often about the things that two people share, things that might have happened in the past but still happen nonetheless. This is why Nikolai's attempts to kidnap Archer away from Mallory are still viewed by the narrative as a cruel thing to do, because the fact of whether Nikolai really is Archer's father is totally irrelevant compared to the fact that he's done next to nothing for the boy his whole life, only trying to get closer to spite a scorned ex-lover, rather than to repair the relationship.